All right, Krystal, what are you taking a look at?
The total Democratic Party collapse in Virginia, New Jersey, and nationally has sure led to some takes. MSNBC in particular seemed to go into full meltdown mode, reaching for a familiar villain, the corrupt politicians. Nah. The failure of Democrats to deliver on even basic campaign promises, not so much. Maybe the fact that Terry McAuliffe didn't run on a single damn thing other than Trump is bad. Of course not. The problem was the Democratic Party's old nemesis, the voters. Those bad old voters who just won't do what they're supposed to do and show up every single election to vote Democrat, regardless of how pathetic, inept, or sold out the party proves themselves to be. But of all the bad takes, there was one that really went above and beyond. Just take a listen.
What the Democrats' theory of the case is that the white non-college educated voter cares about things like kitchen table issues, like infrastructure and pipes and how many gallons of milk you can put on the table. I contend that what they care about is using their guns on black people and getting away with it. That's what they want. That's what they actually are in it for.
Wow. Where do I even begin with this one? First of all, let's just start with the fact that the idea that Democrats have leaned into kitchen table issues or delivered on kitchen table issues is actually hilarious. What they've really done is won the presidency on a decent agenda and then slowly, week by week, shot the most popular provisions in the head very publicly. So I don't know what the Democrats' theory of the case is, but Lord knows it's not delivering on kitchen table issues. But obviously, the really disturbing part here is how Elie Mystal just casually smears an entire demographic group as racist killers whose main political consideration is being able to shoot black people. This somehow manages to be both blatantly racist and blatantly classist all at the same time. Yeah, the college-educated whites, they have enough learning to vote the correct way, but those poor whites don't know anything except guns and the KKK. You are essentializing an entire group of people down to the sum total of their race and their education status. And in the process, you're also completely letting the Democratic Party off the hook. Once again, the Democratic Party can never fail, only be failed by the deplorable public, insinuating that there is something uniquely evil or bad about a particular segment of the population. So let's talk about the white working class again. Look, there is no denying race is a potent force in American politics. No doubt about it. There is certainly also no denying that elites weaponize race to divide the working class and maintain power for themselves. Clinton bundler Terry McAuliffe, I'm sure, knows a thing or two about those sorts of politics. But the last thing a leftist or progressive should want to do is to play into that game. There's also no denying that class and race are linked together, leaving those whites who are struggling more vulnerable to racist and xenophobic messaging. But the shockingly horrible view that all working class whites care about is shooting black people is not only wildly offensive, but it is wildly unsupported by data. First of all, the fact that Republicans keep winning larger and larger shares of Latino voters is an uncomfortable fact for the all Republican votes are really just votes for white supremacy narrative. The existence of a significant number of Obama-Trump voters, also a rather inconvenient fact for that narrative. But look at this. I'm also old enough to remember the summer of 2020, when some 74% of Americans voiced their support for racial justice protests, including 65% of white, non-college educated voters. You might recall those protests were ignited by the murder of a black man. That would seem to fly in the face of the theory that latent pro-shooting black people sentiment is what's really driving voters to the polls. Looking at this specific election, we've got a real-time experiment we can look to. Virginia and New Jersey, they both had elections. Now in Virginia, the GOP did lean a lot more into white grievance politics by making critical race theory into a campaign issue. In New Jersey, critical race theory didn't really figure as a significant campaign issue. However, New Jersey actually saw a larger shift to Republicans than Virginia did, indicating, if anything, that the GOP's focus on critical race theory may actually have been somewhat of a turnoff. After all, the number one issue for voters was still the economy, and those white moms who did say education was their biggest issue, they seemed, when you asked them, to care a lot more about closed schools and recovering from virtual learning than about CRT.
The school closures were really hard for a lot of kids, and one of my kids in particular really suffered when schools were closed.
It affected my family dynamic. It affected my social circles. It affected every part of me that the kids couldn't go to school. And so I had to figure out, what can I do to make sure that that never happens again?
And you feel like even right now, and not enough is being done to address their learning loss. And you view that as a crisis.
We think
it's an emergency.
Our kids are in crisis. The learning loss is real. So we're in a situation where our kids are really far behind, and they need a lot of help. They need a lot of additional tutoring. They need a lot of additional time after school to help catch them up. And they're still not focusing on that.
How much did that factor into you, for you, the CRT debate and everything?
Definitely the education, the learning loss was number one for me. Everything else was below that.
Mandates and CRT did not influence my decision at all.
How about for you, Sandra?
No, mine was all about the school closures.
Voters didn't suddenly shift to Republicans because they randomly became more racist. In fact, you could easily have predicted these very results just knowing Biden's approval rating, historical precedent, and the fact that something like 70% of Americans now say the country is on the wrong track. But I will say, this type of judgmental and condescending attitude coming from Democrats and their allies will definitely turn off a whole lot of voters, as it should. Who wants to be essentialized down to nothing but the sum total of their identity, told who you are and what you're about based on your race, your geography, or your education status? And we shouldn't pretend this was an isolated issue either, because while CRT in Virginia schools, it was mostly a manufactured moral panic over nothing, and likely not at all determinative in the Virginia elections ultimately either, it is certainly true that a destructive, so woke it's racist ideology is gaining traction among an influential academic left. Eric Levitz has a good piece out on this. He points to a trend of so-called equity consultants that can traffic in overly simplified and just straight up racist notions about white people versus, quote, color groups. One influential consultant in this world, Tima Akun, she believes, for example, that, quote, objectivity, a sense of urgency, and thinking in binaries like good or bad and right or wrong are defining characteristics of white supremacy culture. She therefore advises progressive organizations to rid themselves of those, quote, damaging tendencies. Of this type of thinking, Levitz goes on to write, quote, positing fundamental cultural distinctions between people with different pigmentations, not different class, regional, national, or religious backgrounds, but merely different concentrations of melanin, is a task better left to white supremacists than to equity coaches. Hear, hear. Democrats trying to understand what the hell happened to their standing with rural America and the white working class should start by looking in the mirror. The white working class didn't get worse. Democratic elites, high on big money, got worse. And that is one generalization I am perfectly comfortable making. Sagar, I was pretty stunned by these comments. Just to blanket Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.